The year 1998 clung to the Black Forest like a persistent mist, damp and ancient. For Klaus Richter, a man whose life was etched into the contours of these woods, it was just another Tuesday. He moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who understood the language of rustling leaves and snapping twigs, his axe a familiar extension of his arm. His days were a rhythm of felling, hauling, and the occasional, almost meditative break to listen to the forest's hushed secrets. But on this particular Tuesday, the forest decided to speak a different tongue. He was deep in a rarely traversed section, near the skeletal remains of an old hunting lodge, a place whispered about in local folklore as a site of forgotten tragedies. The air here was heavier, cooler, even on a mild spring day. As he cleared a patch of stubborn undergrowth, his boot snagged on something unyielding. Not a root, not a rock. He knelt, brushing away damp earth and decaying leaves to reveal a dark, almost featureless object. It was a bag, made of a thick, weather-resistant material, its surface slick with moss and grime. It looked as though it had been there for decades, swallowed by the forest floor. Curiosity, a rare indulgence for the pragmatic Klaus, pricked at him. He tugged, and the bag, surprisingly light, came free. It was sealed with a series of intricate, almost archaic clasps. With a grunt, he forced one open, then another. The interior was dry, remarkably so, and a faint, almost metallic scent wafted out. Inside, nestled amongst layers of protective fabric, were documents and an identity. A passport, a driver's license, and a business card, all bearing the same name, Julian Thorne. A lawyer, and a date of birth that would have made him well into his 60s had he still been alive. Klaus remembered the whispers from years ago, the missing lawyer, the official ruling of suicide. He dismissed it then, another city problem that had drifted into the quiet sanctity of his woods. Now it had returned, a tangible ghost. He reported his find to the local police, a small, sleepy station that dealt mostly with lost hikers and minor poaching infractions. Inspector Schmidt, a man whose ambition had long since atrophied, took the report with a weary sigh. Another one, Klaus, probably some old rubbish. But even Schmidt's jaded eyes widened slightly at the sight of the passport. Julian Thorne. The name resonated, a faint echo of a scandal long buried. The official line had been clear. Julian Thorne, a brilliant but troubled human rights lawyer, had vanished after a particularly contentious case, presumed to have taken his own life under the weight of professional pressure. His car had been found abandoned near a cliff overlooking the Rhine. A suicide note, albeit a rather vague one, discovered on the passenger seat. The case had been closed, filed away under unfortunate incidents. Klaus, however, was not so easily dismissed. He insisted on the unusual nature of the find, the meticulous sealing of the bag, the pristine condition of its contents. He even mentioned a small, almost imperceptible indentation in the earth where the bag had rested, as if it had been placed there with deliberate care, not merely dropped. Schmidt, eager to close the file, humored him, promising a thorough investigation. Klaus left, a seed of unease planted in his mind. The forest, he knew, rarely gave up its secrets without a reason. Days later, a grainy photograph landed in a Lara Thorne's inbox. It was an anonymous email, the sender's address a jumble of random characters. The subject line read, "Your father." Her heart, usually a steady drumbeat of controlled emotion, lurched. She clicked, her fingers trembling. The image that bloomed on her screen was blurry, but unmistakable. A worn, leather-bound diary, its pages filled with a familiar, elegant script, her father's handwriting. Below it, a passport, its cover slightly faded, but the name Julian Thorne starkly visible. And a cryptic message typed below the image. "The truth is buried deeper than you think, Fräulein Thorne." Elara Thorne, at 30, carried the weight of 9 years of unanswered questions. Her father's disappearance had not been a quiet fading, but a violent rupture in the fabric of her life. The official verdict of suicide had been a cruel joke, a bureaucratic dismissal of a man who had fought for justice with every fiber of his being. Julian Thorne was not a man who gave up, not on his clients, and certainly not on life. She had spent the better part of a decade chasing shadows, sifting through old case files, interviewing reluctant colleagues, and battling the polite indifference of the authorities. Her mother, broken by the loss and the public humiliation, had urged her to move on, to accept the inevitable. But Elara couldn't. The silence of his absence was a scream in her ears. She lived in a small, cluttered apartment in Berlin, a sanctuary of books, newspaper clippings, and the faint scent of old paper. Her work as an investigative journalist for an independent online publication, The Unseen Truth, was less a career and more a continuation of her personal crusade. She specialized in cold cases, corporate malfeasance, and the uncomfortable truths that powerful institutions preferred to keep buried. Each article was a subtle act of defiance, a quiet echo of her father's unwavering commitment to justice. She was good at it, driven by an intensity that bordered on obsession. But even her sharp intellect and relentless dedication had yielded nothing tangible about Julian's fate, until now. The photograph was a jolt, an electric current through her carefully constructed composure. Hope, a dangerous and often deceptive emotion, surged through her, but it was tempered by a chilling fear. Could this be a cruel trick, a deliberate manipulation? The anonymous nature of the email, the cryptic message, all spoke of a calculated move. Yet the handwriting, she knew it intimately. She had traced those elegant loops and precise strokes countless times in her childhood, watching her father draft legal briefs late into the night. This was real. This was a lead. The first true lead in 9 long years. She spent the rest of the day in a blur, her mind racing, replaying every detail of the email, every nuance of the photograph. She tried to trace the sender, but the email was untraceable, routed through a labyrinth of proxy servers. The message, however, lingered. The truth is buried deeper than you think. It was a challenge, an invitation, and a warning all at once. The Black Forest. She knew the region, its dense ancient woods, its reputation for harboring secrets. It was a place where things could disappear, and where, sometimes, they could resurface. She knew what she had to do. The Black Forest was calling, and Elara Thorne, the vanished advocate's daughter, was finally ready to answer. The journey from Berlin to the heart of the Black Forest was a blur of autobahn and winding country roads. Elara drove with a singular focus, the hum of the engine a counterpoint to the frantic beat of her own heart. The landscape shifted from urban sprawl to rolling hills, then to the dense, dark embrace of the forest itself. Towering firs, their branches heavy with shadow, seemed to lean in, whispering ancient secrets. It was a place of stark beauty and unsettling mystery, a fitting stage for the drama that was about to unfold. Her first stop was the local police station, a modest building that seemed more suited to a sleepy village than the epicenter of a potential international scandal. Inspector Schmidt, a man whose face was a roadmap of weary resignation, greeted her with a polite but firm skepticism. He had already dismissed the bag as a curious anomaly, a likely prank, or perhaps a desperate attempt by a con artist to stir up old news. He presented her with a brief, perfunctory report, reiterating the official stance on Julian Thorne's disappearance.
Ms. Thorne, we understand your distress, but there is nothing here to suggest anything other than what was concluded 9 years ago, a tragic suicide.
Ilara, however, was not easily deterred. She pressed him, her voice calm but insistent about the details of the find, the meticulous sealing of the bag, the pristine condition of its contents, the precise location. Schmidt, clearly annoyed by her persistence, reluctantly provided the name of the forest worker, Klaus Richter, and the general vicinity of the discovery. He then ushered her out, clearly eager to return to his routine of paperwork and quiet contemplation. Armed with Klaus's name and a rough map, Ilara navigated the labyrinthine forest roads, her small rental car dwarfed by the imposing trees. She found Klaus's modest cabin nestled deep within the woods, a wisp of smoke curling from its chimney. Klaus, a man of few words and weathered features, eyed her with a mixture of suspicion and grudging respect. He recognized the intensity in her eyes, the same fire he'd seen in her father's years ago when Julian had visited the region for a case. He recounted the discovery of the bag with a gruff honesty, emphasizing the unusual circumstances. It wasn't just lying there, Fraulein. It was placed, like a message. He led her to the site, a secluded clearing near the dilapidated hunting lodge. The air here was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Ilara knelt, examining the ground. Klaus pointed to a subtle depression, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. See? It was buried, but not deep. Just enough to be hidden, but not lost. Ilara's gaze swept over the surroundings. The lodge, a decaying skeleton of stone and timber, stood silent witness. She noticed a faint, almost invisible trail leading away from the lodge, barely more than a deer path. It was too precise, too deliberate for a random burial. Her father, she knew, was a man of meticulous planning. This was no accident. This was a message. A breadcrumb trail left for someone to find. Back at Klaus's cabin, over mugs of strong black coffee, Ilara showed him the photograph of the diary. Klaus's eyes, usually as impassive as the forest itself, softened slightly. He was a good man, your father, fought for the little people. He then shared a small, almost forgotten detail. Years ago, Julian Thorne had sought him out, asking about remote, untraceable locations in the forest, places where one could disappear without a trace. Klaus had dismissed it as a lawyer's eccentric curiosity at the time. Now it resonated with chilling clarity.
Ilara spent the next few days in the Black Forest, a whirlwind of interviews and investigations. She spoke to locals, some of whom remembered Julian Thorne's presence in the area, a quiet, intense man who asked too many questions. She visited the old courthouse, sifting through dusty archives, trying to piece together the details of the case Julian had been handling before his disappearance. It was a complex web of corporate fraud, environmental violations, and political corruption, all centered around a powerful, seemingly untouchable European conglomerate known only as the Consortium. Her attempts to get the police to reopen the case were met with polite but firm resistance. Inspector Schmidt, under pressure from his superiors, reiterated that without new concrete evidence, they could not justify diverting resources to a 9-year-old cold case. The diary, they argued, could be a forgery, the bag a plant. Ilara knew she needed more. She needed to decipher the encrypted documents, and for that, she needed an expert. Her search led her to Dr. Anya Sharma, a forensic linguist and cryptographer at the University of Heidelberg. Anya was a woman of sharp intellect and even sharper wit, her office a chaotic symphony of books, papers, and half-eaten energy bars. Elara presented her with the digital copies of the encrypted documents, explaining the extraordinary circumstances of their discovery. Anya, initially skeptical, became increasingly intrigued as she examined the complex algorithms and historical ciphers embedded within the files. "This is sophisticated," she murmured, her fingers dancing across her keyboard. "This suggests a professional, someone with a deep understanding of cryptography or access to very advanced tools for the time." As Anya delved deeper into the encryption, Elara continued her own investigation, a gnawing sense of unease growing within her. She started receiving anonymous phone calls, the line silent, then a click. Her apartment building's security camera footage showed a dark sedan parked outside for hours, its windows tinted. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to send a shiver down her spine. Someone was watching her. Someone knew she was getting close. The syndicate, she realized, was still very much alive, and they were aware of her presence.
One evening, as Anya worked late into the night, a breakthrough. A small section of the documents yielded to her relentless assault, revealing not a direct message, but a pattern, a key. It's a variant of the Vigenère cipher, but with a rotating key based on a specific historical text, Anya announced, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "Your father was brilliant, Elara. He didn't just encrypt the data, he hid the key in plain sight for someone who knew where to look." The historical text, they discovered, was a lesser-known treatise on legal ethics, a book Julian had often quoted. With this new understanding, more fragments of the encrypted data began to yield their secrets. The first clear message was chilling. "They know. Contingency initiated. Seek Volkov. He holds the key to the next step." Viktor Volkov. The name sent a jolt through Elara. He was a ghost from her father's past, a former colleague who had abruptly vanished from the legal scene shortly after Julian's disappearance. Rumors had swirled around him, whispers of shady dealings, connections to the underworld, a man who knew too much. Tracking him down was a challenge, a journey through the murky underbelly of European intelligence and illicit information networks. She followed a trail of hushed conversations, anonymous tips, and coded messages, eventually finding him in a nondescript apartment in Prague, a city steeped in shadows and secrets. Volkov, a gaunt man with haunted eyes, initially refused to speak, his face a mask of fear and suspicion. He had lived in hiding for years, a self-imposed exile, constantly looking over his shoulder. Elara, however, was persistent. She spoke of her father, of his unwavering belief in justice, of the legacy he had left behind. She showed him the decrypted message, Julian's own words, urging her to seek him out. The sight of Julian's handwriting, a tangible link to a past he had tried to bury, finally broke through Volkov's defenses. He spoke, his voice a raspy whisper, of the syndicate. Not just a conglomerate, but a hydra-headed beast, its tentacles reaching into every facet of European power, finance, politics, even law enforcement. Julian, he revealed, had been on the verge of exposing their most heinous operation, a vast money laundering scheme that funded international terrorism and human trafficking. Volkov had been Julian's confidant, his silent partner in the investigation. When Julian disappeared, Volkov had fled, convinced he would be next. He had carried a terrible burden of guilt, believing he had abandoned his friend. Volkov then revealed the crucial piece of information, a dead drop.
Julian, ever the strategist, had anticipated his capture or disappearance. He had set up a series of dead drops, locations known only to a select few, where he would leave encrypted messages, documents, and if necessary, a final damning testament. The first dead drop, Volkov explained, was a specific locker in a forgotten train station in Geneva, a city synonymous with discretion and hidden wealth. The key to the locker, he said, was a unique, antique silver locket, one Julian always wore, a gift from Ilara's mother.
Ilara's heart pounded. The locket. Her mother had kept it, a cherished memento of Julian, believing it was the last thing he had touched. The thought of confronting her mother, of reopening old wounds, was agonizing. Their relationship had been strained since Julian's disappearance. Her mother, consumed by grief and a desperate need for normalcy, had tried to move on, to forget the pain. Ilara's relentless pursuit of the truth had been a constant reminder of their shared tragedy, a wound that refused to heal. But now the locket was not just a memento, it was a key, a vital piece of the puzzle. It was a bridge back to her father, and perhaps a bridge back to her mother. She returned to Berlin, the weight of Volkov's revelations pressing down on her. The anonymous threats had intensified. Her apartment had been subtly ransacked, nothing stolen, but a clear message left. "We know you're here, we're watching." Anya, meanwhile, had made further progress with the decryption, confirming Volkov's story. The documents detailed the syndicate's intricate financial network, naming key players, shell corporations, and offshore accounts. The scale of their operation was staggering, a web of corruption that stretched across continents. The pieces were falling into place, forming a terrifying picture of power and impunity. Ilara knew she couldn't face her mother directly about the locket, not yet. She needed to approach it delicately, to prepare her for the possibility that Julian's disappearance was not a suicide, but something far more sinister. She started by sharing small details, fragments of the decrypted messages, hints of the truth she was uncovering. Her mother, initially resistant, slowly began to listen, a flicker of hope and fear returning to her eyes. The process was slow, painful, but necessary. The locket, Ilara knew, was not just a physical object. It was a symbol of their shared past, a conduit to the truth that had been buried for so long. And as she prepared for the journey to Geneva, she knew that the truth, once unearthed, would shake the foundations of their lives, and perhaps the world. The train to Geneva was a sleek silver bullet slicing through the European landscape. Ilara sat by the window, the Swiss Alps a majestic snow-capped backdrop to her churning thoughts. Her mother's reaction to the locket had been a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a fragile, almost desperate hope. She had clutched the silver locket, its surface dulled by years of neglect, as if it were a fragile bird. "She had always worn it," she had whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. Said it reminded him of us. The locket, a simple oval with a delicate filigree border, had a tiny, almost invisible clasp. Inside, Ilara knew, was the key to the locker in the forgotten Geneva train station.
Geneva, with its pristine lake and imposing financial institutions, felt like a city built on secrets. Every polished facade seemed to hide a labyrinth of hidden transactions and hushed agreements. The train station, a grand, echoing structure, was a microcosm of the city itself, bustling with travelers, yet with an underlying current of anonymity. Ilara found the designated locker bank in a dimly lit, rarely used corridor, its metal doors scarred with the passage of time. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she inserted the tiny key from the locket into the lock. It turned with a soft click, a sound that resonated with the weight of 9 years of waiting. Inside the locker, nestled in a velvet pouch, was not a bomb or a stack of incriminating documents, but a single leather-bound journal. It was Julian's hand, a different journal from the one found in the Black Forest, this one filled with a more personal, almost philosophical account of his final days before his disappearance. And tucked within its pages, a microfiche. Anya had prepared her for this. A microfiche, a relic of a bygone era, was a highly efficient way to store vast amounts of information in a tiny, almost undetectable format. It was a testament to Julian's foresight, his understanding of the need for absolute discretion. Ilara immediately called Anya, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "I found it, a journal and a microfiche." Anya, ever the pragmatist, instructed her to find a microfiche reader, a task that proved surprisingly difficult in the digital age. After several frantic calls and a few dead ends, she located one in the dusty archives of a small independent research library. The librarian, a kindly old woman with spectacles perched on her nose, seemed amused by Ilara's archaic request. As the microfiche whirred to life, projecting its tiny images onto the screen, Ilara and Anya, connected by a crackling phone line, began to decipher its contents. It was a treasure trove of information, a meticulously compiled dossier on the syndicate. Names, dates, transactions, shell companies, offshore accounts, political connections, even a detailed organizational chart. It was all there, laid bare. The sheer scale of their operations was breathtaking, a global network of corruption that dwarfed anything Ilara had imagined. The money laundering scheme Volkov had hinted at was just the tip of the iceberg. There were details of illicit arms deals, human trafficking rings, and even the systematic suppression of whistleblowers, some of whom had met untimely ends.
But the most shocking revelation came in the final pages of the microfiche. Julian had not disappeared. He had been abducted. The suicide note, the abandoned car, all a meticulously staged deception. He had been held captive, interrogated and tortured, but he had never broken. He had used his time in captivity to gather more information, to observe his captors, to understand their methods. He had even managed to smuggle out the microfiche, a desperate act of defiance, a final message to the world. The journal detailed his escape, a daring, almost impossible feat, and his subsequent life in hiding, moving from safe house to safe house, always one step ahead of his pursuers. He had been alive all these years, and he had been planning his return, planning their downfall. Ilara felt a surge of emotions, relief, anger, a profound sense of awe at her father's resilience. He was not a victim, he was a survivor, a ghost in the machine, meticulously dismantling the syndicate from the shadows. The bag in the Black Forest, the diary, the anonymous tip, it was all part of his elaborate plan, a series of breadcrumbs designed to lead her, his daughter, to the truth. He had trusted her, believed in her, even when she had doubted herself. The message, "The truth is buried deeper than you think," was not just a warning, it was a testament to his enduring faith in her ability to uncover it. As Ilara absorbed the enormity of the revelation, a chilling realization dawned on her. If Julian was alive, and if he had orchestrated this elaborate reveal, then the syndicate would be aware of it. They would know the microfiche existed, and they would be coming for her. The subtle threats, the surveillance, it wasn't just a warning, it was a prelude. She was no longer just an investigative journalist. She was a key player in a dangerous game, a pawn in her father's grand strategy. And the game, she knew, was about to reach its terrifying climax. The air in Anya's Heidelberg office crackled with a nervous energy. The microfiche, now fully digitized and meticulously cross-referenced,
lay spread across her large, cluttered desk. It was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, a testament to Julian Thorne's unwavering dedication and extraordinary foresight. The data, once a series of cryptic codes, now painted a damning portrait of the syndicate, a global criminal enterprise masquerading as a legitimate financial powerhouse. The names of their key operatives, their illicit dealings, their political pawns, it was all there, irrefutable proof of their pervasive corruption. "This is it, Ilara," Anya said, her voice hushed with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "This is everything. Your father, he didn't just survive, he built a weapon."
Ilara stared at the glowing screen, the weight of the information pressing down on her. The truth, so long sought, was finally within her grasp. But with it came a chilling realization. The syndicate would stop at nothing to keep this information from seeing the light of day. Her subtle threats had escalated. The anonymous calls were now accompanied by muffled breathing, a sinister presence on the other end of the line. Her apartment had been broken into again, this time with a clear message. A single red rose placed on her pillow, its thorns deliberately removed. A symbol of silent warning, a promise of pain without a trace. "We need to get this out," Ilara said, her voice firm, betraying none of the fear that gnawed at her. "To the world, immediately." Their plan was audacious, a high-stakes gamble. They would leak the entire dossier to a consortium of major international news organizations simultaneously, ensuring that no single entity could be silenced or intimidated. They would use a secure, encrypted network, bouncing the data through multiple servers across the globe, making it virtually untraceable. Anya, with her unparalleled technical skills, would orchestrate the digital release, while Ilara would prepare a concise, compelling summary, a press release that would serve as the fuse to this explosive revelation. As they worked, a sense of urgency permeated the small office. Every click of the keyboard, every whispered conversation felt like a ticking clock. Ilara knew they were racing against time, against an unseen enemy that was closing in. She had a gut feeling, a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, that their window of opportunity was rapidly shrinking. Just as Anya initiated the final upload sequence, the lights flickered. A low hum, then silence. The building's power had been cut. "They're here," Anya whispered, her face pale in the dim light filtering through the window. Ilara's heart leaped into her throat. She grabbed the hard drive containing the original microfiche data, a last resort, a physical backup. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, heavy and deliberate. The door to Anya's office, reinforced but not impenetrable, groaned under a sudden impact. "Ilara, the back exit," Anya urged, pointing to a small, rarely used fire escape. "Go, I'll try to buy you some time."
Ilara hesitated, a wave of guilt washing over her. She had dragged Anya into this. "No, I'm not leaving you. Don't be a fool," Anya snapped, her voice surprisingly strong. "This is bigger than us. Get the data out. Your father's legacy depends on it." She then grabbed a heavy, antique globe from her desk, her eyes glinting with a fierce determination. "Now go!" Ilara, with a desperate nod, scrambled towards the fire escape. When she fumbled with the rusty latch, the office door splintered inward, revealing two hulking figures, their faces obscured by balaclavas. They moved with a chilling efficiency, their eyes immediately scanning the room for Ilara. Anya, with a surprising burst of strength, swung the globe, catching one of the assailants squarely in the head. He staggered, giving Ilara a precious few seconds. She burst onto the fire escape, the cold night air a shock against her face. She clattered down the metal stairs, her breath ragged, the hard drive clutched tightly to her chest. Below, a black van idled silently, its engine barely a whisper. As she reached the ground, a third figure emerged from the shadows. He was taller,
more agile, and moved with a predatory grace. He held a silenced pistol, its dark muzzle glinting in the faint moonlight. "Give it to me, Ms. Thorne," he said, his voice a low, chilling growl, devoid of any emotion. "It's over." Ilara's mind raced. She was trapped. The data, the culmination of her father's life's work, was within reach of these ruthless individuals. She had to act. She had to ensure the truth saw the light of day. Her eyes darted around, searching for an escape, a distraction, anything. Her gaze landed on a small, overflowing dumpster, its lid ajar. A desperate idea, a final, audacious gamble formed in her mind.
"Never," she spat, her voice trembling but defiant. With a sudden, unexpected movement, she hurled the hard drive with all her might towards the dumpster. It sailed through the air, a dark projectile against the night sky. The assailant reacted instantly, firing a shot that whizzed past her ear, narrowly missing. But it was too late. The hard drive landed with a muffled thud, disappearing into the depths of the refuse. The assailant cursed, his composure finally cracking. He lunged towards the dumpster, but Ilara, seizing the opportunity, sprinted into the labyrinthine alleyways, her footsteps echoing in the darkness. She could hear him behind her, his heavy boots pounding on the cobblestones. She ran blindly, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate hope that her gamble had paid off. The hard drive was safe, for now, but she knew, with a chilling certainty, that her fight was far from over. The truth was out there, buried in the digital ether, and soon the world would know. The world awoke to a firestorm. The simultaneous release of Julian Thorne's meticulously compiled dossier, disseminated by Anya's ingenious network, hit the global news cycle with the force of a tsunami. Headlines screamed, news anchors stammered, and stock markets reeled. The syndicate, once an untouchable behemoth, found its dark underbelly exposed to the harsh glare of public scrutiny. The sheer volume and irrefutable nature of the evidence, from detailed financial ledgers to chilling transcripts of illicit dealings, left no room for doubt. The money laundering, the arms trafficking, the human exploitation, it was all laid bare, a testament to Julian Thorne's unwavering commitment to justice, even from the shadows.
Arrests followed swiftly. High-ranking executives, corrupt politicians, and shadowy intermediaries, once thought to be beyond the reach of the law, were apprehended in coordinated raids across Europe. The syndicate's vast financial network began to unravel, its assets frozen, its illicit operations crippled. The dominoes fell, one after another, a cascade of justice that had been 9 years in the making. Julian Thorne's name, once synonymous with the tragic disappearance, was now cleared, his legacy restored. The official ruling of suicide was overturned, replaced by a formal acknowledgement of his forced disappearance and his heroic efforts to expose a global criminal enterprise. Ilara, however, found little time for celebration. The victory, while profound, was tinged with a deep weariness. She had achieved her goal, but the cost had been immense. The constant fear, the relentless pursuit, the near-fatal confrontation, it had taken its toll. Yet, amidst the exhaustion, there was a quiet sense of triumph, a profound satisfaction that she had honored her father's memory, that she had completed the mission he had so meticulously planned. Her relationship with her mother, once strained by grief and unspoken resentments, began to heal. The truth, painful as it was, had finally set them free. Her mother, seeing the public vindication of Julian's name, finally found a measure of peace. She joined Ilara in the safe house, and for the first time in years, they spoke openly about Julian, about their shared loss, and about the man who had sacrificed everything for his beliefs. The locket, once a symbol of unresolved grief, became a symbol of enduring love and the unbreakable bond of family. As the dust settled, Ilara found herself at a crossroads.
The personal quest that had defined her life for so long was complete. But the world, she realized, was still full of injustices, of hidden truths waiting to be unearthed. Her work as an investigative journalist, once a means to an end, had become her true calling. She had a platform now, a voice that resonated with authority and credibility. The Unseen Truth, her online publication, became a beacon for those seeking justice, a testament to the power of independent journalism.
She continued to work closely with Anya, their partnership forged in the crucible of danger and shared purpose. Anya, now a celebrated figure in the world of cybersecurity and digital forensics, used her skills to expose other networks of corruption, her work often complementing Ilara's investigative reporting. Klaus, the gruff forest worker, remained a steadfast friend, a quiet reminder of the humble beginnings of their extraordinary journey. He occasionally sent Ilara cryptic messages about strange occurrences in the Black Forest, hints of new mysteries waiting to be solved. Ilara's life found a new rhythm, a balance between the relentless pursuit of truth and the quiet moments of reflection. She was no longer haunted by the past, but empowered by it. The scars remained, but they were a testament to her resilience, a reminder of the battles fought and won. She had learned that justice was not a destination, but a continuous journey, a constant struggle against the forces of darkness, and she was ready for it. The story concludes with Ilara standing on a cliff overlooking the Rhine, the same river where her father's car had been found. The wind whipped around her, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. She held the silver locket in her hand, its surface now polished and gleaming. She thought of her father, of his courage, his foresight, his unwavering belief in the power of truth. He was gone, but his spirit lived on, not just in her, but in the countless lives he had touched, in the justice he had helped to bring about. The sun, breaking through the clouds, cast a golden glow over the landscape, a new dawn for a world that had finally seen the light. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of Europe, a man named Julian Thorne, a ghost in the machine, smiled. His plan had worked. The truth, like water, had finally found its way to the surface.